As you said before, it's very costly, this program, and yet the 0.15% increase as a percentage of GDP seems rather modest, especially when you consider that experts like Marcus Hellier, Dennis Richardson are predicting that defence spending would have to be at least 2.5% of GDP, if not more. So how do you tally the giant cost of it and it being relatively modest?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question. I think 0.15% of GDP is the best way to describe this. And I think when you consider what we are doing to transform the capability and the potency of the Australian Defence Force, it is modest. I think that's right. I think this is
I'm not endorsing it. I'm just questioning why it should be so modest when others say it should be higher.
Yeah, no. I'm endorsing the idea that it's modest, and it's and when you think about the potency and the capability that comes for this, this is as good a value for money spend in defence that you will get. Now, we've got a long way to go in terms of how we structure the ADF, and in about a month's time there'll be the second of the big announcements, which is when we release the public version of the Defence Strategic Review, and there will be some very big decisions in relation to that as well. But I think it is important to understand that amidst all the figures that have been thrown around in respect of this program, and it's the point I was making earlier, you can take any ability of government and forecast it out to the middle of the 2050s and you will get a large number. And let's be clear, there's something of a guesstimate whenever one does that, because inherent in that number is whatever the inflation rate is in 2050, and no one knows that. But when you boil it all down, what we're talking about is 0.15% in a context of a defence budget which is right now at 2.0 growing to 2.2. And for that 0.15, we transform the potency of our Defence Force, which is why we must do this.
Mr. Marles, even taking the difficulties of the forecasting into account, do you confirm that $268 to $368 billion figure? And can you give Australians an idea of whether sacrifices will be required in other parts of the budget? The opposition leader is already talking about possible cuts to the NDIS. Are these the conversations that we're going to have?
Well, in terms of the first part of the question, I'll let you all do the maths, but I've kind of made the point that whatever maths you end up doing will have a whole lot of assumptions in it, which are very difficult to verify at this moment. 0.15% of GDP is the clearest and most honest way to describe this cost through the life of the program. We're not about to. I'm not about to turn this into a press conference about what the budget looks like. Obviously, the Treasurer is convening the ERC right now in full swing, and there's a whole lot of conversations going on in relation to that. The important point to make about the cost in respect of the forward estimates is that Defence is covering it. So Defence is cost neutral with this over the forward estimates. Now, I think the idea that anyone would have suggested that was possible when we came to government would have been described as being crazy. And yet we have got to a point where it is going to be Defence neutral over that time.
Sorry, just to supplement that 0.15%, to be clear, includes costings that have never been provided for other defence projects in this country. It includes developing and upskilling the workforce and industry, supporting the supply chain, the infrastructure in South Australia and Western Australia, the build and delivery of the program, the operations, importantly, sustainment of the platforms and the weapons and contingency, unlike the attack class, which didn't include the costs of the workforce, the facilities, contingency, weapons, sustainment, or the West Coast base infrastructure. So, as the DPM has said, we are being incredibly transparent with the Australian public about the costs of this national undertaking.